self-care has kind of gotten a bit, like I said, commercialized. So a lot of times you need products or to pay, like to spend money in some way on a self-care product or item. I think sometimes self-care can kind of get like woven into like something to do with your appearance as well. Like self-care is a face mask or it's a facial. I mean, that can kind of get woven into these things that are very external, right? And I think that the way that the how of you of self-care may change day to day. But to your point, I think the permanent part is that that it's coming from you and not coming from outside.
Welcome to Permission the Podcast. I'm Dr. T, and this is my sister,
Silvana, and we are two regular people talking about spirituality in our daily lives.
Each week, we're inviting you to the internal conversation. So let's get started.
With your permission. And we're back.
Welcome back to Permission the Podcast. So today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Badass Rebellion, which I've been excited about for quite some time, to be honest.
I've been excited about the name. Badass.
And how this happened, it was I believe it was back in January when I was going through the process of doing my own book launch that I received a notification email from Pezzi that was kind of promoting their book. And that kind of alignment of the three of you were doing a book, you were doing a podcast, and it felt, I don't know, symbiotic or something synchronistic. And so I was encouraged to reach out and yada, 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 we're here. And, I feel like it would be best for introductions to be done by the people themselves. So I'll give you the platform. Whoever wants to jump in first, go for it.
I'll go first. My name is Avery Hoenig, and I'm a psychologist in Dallas. You'll be hearing a lot of these same details from Lucy and Jamie. We all three are psychologists in Dallas, and we're in private practice. We happen to office together as well, which is amazing. And we really started this Badass Rebellion piece kind of after we had done our own podcast for a bit. Our podcast is called Inspiration from the Couch, which came from really feeling very isolated during the pandemic. I'm sure anyone that was in private practice or having to work from home shared in that feeling of just like you're kind of talking to people all day, but also like not really connecting. And so it was really nice to do something collaborative. And so that's when we decided, but right in the midst of the pandemic is when we decided to do a podcast. And then I'll let Lucy and Jamie talk more about kind of how we went from podcast to where we are now.
You want me to go, Lucy? Okay. Yeah, so we started the podcast and we did that for a little while, almost 2 years? And
that sounds right to me.
Yeah, and how did we get to the book? I think we were we were having a really good time with the podcast and noticed, we say the same things to a lot of our clients. A lot of our clients are female. And I think for the three of us sort of being in midlife, had a big interest in that particular population of women. And so decided we wanted to write a book. And initially it was a little bit more midlife focused. And so we went to the Psychotherapy Networker Conference, which is held in DC every year. And Pessy is a sponsor there. And we were out and about, and I pitched an idea to one publisher, and they really, really liked it. And so that kind of took us off from there. And we went through that process for a little bit. But they were for about a year, because it wasn't until the following year when we went back to the conference and met up with Kate. She was an acquisitions editor for Pessy Bridge City Books at the time. And so met with her, kind of very briefly pitched the idea. And then it was kind of frantic basically over the course of just a few days, we switched to Bridge City Books as a publisher. And then has it been a year and a half since then or longer?
Maybe over
A year?
2.
Over 2 years? I don't know.
Yeah.
Time flies.
Right.
Um, going through that. And then we're able to narrow in on self-abandonment. And I think, uh, Lucy, you can talk about that, maybe how we switched over to, or whatever you want to talk about. I don't want to dictate what you want to talk about.
Good. Okay, so I'm Lucy Smith, and to me, like Avery said, we're all psychologists, we're all in private practice, and we all have kind of slightly different specialty areas in our private practice. But this joint endeavor, I think it was born out of a little bit of like loneliness and isolation, partly due to the pandemic. But I know for me, it was also, private practice I've loved and been so grateful for my private practice. But realizing, we're going to talk about prioritizing yourself today, but that private practice and can like take over. I don't think anyone taught us this in graduate school, that it can be really, really exhausting. And I think of it like you have this really small muscle of like empathy and compassion and listening. And no one really told me that I should have like a lot of limits around my private practice, but I remember coming home and just being like exhausted and depleted. And like, I don't even want to like listen to my kids, like to read them a bedtime story, talk to them. Like, I'm just out, like, my friendships are not great. And so I think finally, like, we kind of realized, like, I don't know how sustainable this is. And I think we need something else. And realizing that there are these other parts of my brain, like I really miss using, like the parts that were like collaborating with people, doing something a little more creative, where you could like talk to people about what you were doing rather than it all being confidential. And so I think that like this badass rebellion was born out of this desire to do something a little different, something that could still be like more than like a hobby, I guess, like something that could be potentially income generating, that could like make a difference in the world, that could but use these different parts of our brain. And so it has been, quite a joy to, I don't know, and it's been a little windy. Does that make sense? So like sometimes we started by doing more like speaking and like a little bit of like coaching sorts of things. And then like somehow this idea of a book, which had always been on each of our, I think, individual bucket lists, but like, okay, how do we work really well together? That was nice about starting with the podcast, to see like, oh, we get along well. We have similar styles of like work. Like this could be nice. And then writing the book together made it much less daunting to do it as a collaborative endeavor.
Yeah. Well, Lucy's right. I think that there was both that pandemic isolation, but also this feeling. I remember because we were very busy during the pandemic. There was, no want for patients. We were in a mental health crisis, as everybody really knows. And so I remember feeling that on one hand, I knew that I could not see any more patients. I was not going to be able to offer good care to patients or good care to myself if I saw more patients, but I still had a capacity to do more work. And so there was this idea of like, I could do more, but I can't do more of this one-on-one individual patient work, because I was kind of at my limit there. And so there was this idea of like, what else could we do? And the podcast was the first kind of iteration of that. And as Lucy said, we did some speaking engagements, things like that, the book, and it has been kind of a circuitous route. I don't know where we are on that route, like middle, I don't know, but it's been really fun to be able to do together. I think that's been something for me that collaboration is something that is missing, I think, for a lot of people in private practice, for me, for sure. And it's been so nice to be able to do that.
And really kind of, to segue into the topic for today, prioritizing yourself, kind of like a radical act of prioritizing ourselves around like being tuned in around like, okay, we are like tapped out with this one sort of work. And so like, what do we need to do? How do we need to adjust? And really like, that's been the through line through all of this, is like, we'll sit down and have a conversation like, okay, how are we feeling about this? Like what needs to adjust? Like what can we get rid of? What do we want to take away? Like, how do we reevaluate our priorities, to really make space for what matters and what's going to like light us up and what we need to do.
100%.
That is so fascinating. I'm in a stage right now where I feel that kind of pull to do more, and part of that is have more impact. And I'm wondering if that was also driving or motivating the podcast and the book for the three of you, because for me it's more of that, of I want to keep the one-on-one for as long as I can sustain it, but at the same time, I want to be able to provide more on a bigger scale. Did that also come into play?
Absolutely. And I think actually that is really what that idea is really what started the podcast, is that we were talking kind of over lunch and we were realizing we were at the time we were seeing everybody virtually during the pandemic, like, and we were realizing we were saying the same things to a lot of people. And we're like, would it be nice if we could just say these things on a platform that maybe everybody could, like, some of the things we were saying were very unique and specific to the client, but some of them were like very generally helpful to the general population. And we were like, wouldn't it be great if we could get some of these? We almost even thought like sometimes like mental health first aid, like these things that you could do as a general population that could be helpful, especially in that moment when we were all kind of struggling with some of the similar, some of the similar issues. But absolutely, that was part of like, how can we get this message that each of us were kind of, resonating with lots of people within our private practices. We're like, this feels like it could be more globally, globally resonate. And I think maybe that's also what something that the podcast has in common with the self abandonment is that our book about self abandonment, that is something that seems to be more of a globally resonate with women as well.
That's awesome. I'm an artist. I'm not a psychologist. And I do a whole bunch of other stuff, but I feel the same when you guys are talking about the same passion I have when I have a circle of women, and just to have that impact of community and growth and it just see the effects rippling. And so I get that.
Mhm.
I love
Yeah,
it.
and I love that you build a community and talk about community, and
Yeah.
I think that's something that
Mhm.
we have wrestled with in some form or fashion. All of us have our private practices or individual therapy, right? And that's like the modality in which we work. But I think feeling in our own lives the power of like community and groups and like the power of more than one in terms of really healing and transforming, which you've probably seen in your like artistic
Yeah.
community circle as well, I imagine. And so almost this question of like, okay, we're doing this individual work, but there's such power and transformation and this like community piece of like, how do we what do we do with that, right? Like, is there a way to like extend this and build more community, especially like in a time when I think people are by and large pretty lonely. I think many of us have a lot of like connections in some ways, but there's a lot of loneliness and disconnection amidst that.
Actually, my women's circle, we it's more a spiritual spin to it. I do introduce art as a healing tool as well, but we do work on themes like boundaries, like themes that, prioritizing yourself, choosing you, and all different themes, healing your inner child. So a lot of the women have, after the circle, I do a couple of circles a month for a couple of hours, and a lot of them tell me this is like therapy.
Mm.
And it's just like, well, when women gather together, when they heal together, it's it's so powerful. It's
Mm.
so great. And I also do rituals. We go to the beach to see the moon rise. We, write intentions, burn them. so so I'm doing all of these things with women, and it's just amazing to see the power, the power we have, the power to support, the power to build, and I see that you guys are doing that as well. I know you guys use permission slip as, you sell permission slips and people write their stuff. And I want to know, what is the biggest permission you've given yourself to prioritize yourself?
Great question.
Or did you need it from somebody else? you know,
I think one of the biggest permission slips that I've used, and I think that when I think about before we started this work together and now after, I think is to really truly listen to my own intuition. Lucy is really was I think really one of the people that brought that to me and Jamie both about really getting quiet. I wish you guys could have seen at the very beginning of our work together. We would like pose a question and Lucy would say, "Hang on a second," and she would like put her hands on her heart or her belly or kind of like on her legs and like take a breath. And she's like, "I think it's
I love
this,"
it.
and it was so beautiful to watch that. And it's gotten to the point now. I'm so close with Jamie and Lucy. I joke, but it's true. I'm like, I'll listen to my intuition or either of yours. Nobody's really has steered us wrong. And so, but that idea, and it really was a good model for me of like pausing and really listening to even something as small. Sometimes Lucy would do that of like, are we hungry? Are we ready for lunch? Should we go take a break and go for a walk? Like it would be little things and then really big things. Like, are we ready to go in a different direction or does this feel right? And I think I was always such a people pleaser that it was really helpful for me to see another person do that, like to model it for me. Because it was really, I'm so much more comfortable looking, kind of scanning the room, kind of seeing what's the general opinion before I like listen to myself. But having that model of Lucy really listening to herself and focusing on that was like, oh, if Lucy, this like showed me how to do it and like gave me permission to listen. It was really that was I think the biggest thing that I carry with me now.
That's amazing.
What a gift.
I
Wow.
know.
Yeah. Yeah. Lucy and Jamie are a gift for sure. They both are for sure.
I think for me, probably one of the biggest permission slips is permission to change your mind.
Mm.
Um, I am not as much of a people pleaser, but when I commit to something, I will sort of like fall prey, I think, to like sunk cost bias of like once I'm in, like if I, as you know, I got to keep going. Like if I've committed to something and like see it through, even though I may be like really, tired or exhausted or burnt out or whatever, like, you just keep kind of like plugging along. And that used to be kind of my tendency for a long time because I mean, I like to be known as, the dependable, responsible, committed kind of individual. And so yeah, I think after I think like the pandemic era, and I had a fairly bad case of burnout because I was seeing clients. I was also supervising individuals in my private practice, and I was adjunct faculty at one of the universities here in the Dallas area, and was teaching a couple of classes there. And a large part of that also was supervision. So it was just a lot everywhere. It's like the film everywhere, everything, everywhere, all at once, or whatever, like whatever that film is. Like that's what it felt like for me, like everywhere, everything. And
Wow.
I just like, uh, and there was kind of this expectation like that I'm going to continue on, that I'm going to continue to supervise, that I'm going to continue to teach and all of that. And so I ended up deciding like, you know what, I really need to go to therapy again. And so work with a lovely woman out of Colorado, Taylor Wright Moffitt, and did a year-long leadership training. And Lucy introduced her, like sort of turned me on to her stuff, and I did a year-long leadership training. And in order to do that, I had to pull back on other things in my life, and then ended up doing therapy with Taylor. And like the questions that she would pose to me really were like kind of challenging, and getting me to tune inward, like Avery was saying, was really important, and giving me that permission to change my mind. Even if, say,
Mm.
I had committed for a semester, or said like, okay, yeah, I'll teach in the summer. Like I decided, like, you know what, I need to like really evaluate things, and I'm gonna, turn this opportunity down. I can't do it. I can't do it anymore, which was
Mm.
very helpful. Yeah.
Do you remember Jamie in the midst of that, like at the busiest you were? So Jamie is like a Disney super fan. She's like the like most Disney person you could ever see. Loves it, goes often, like knows all the ins and outs. But you'd apply to be on like the Disney, like this panel of like
Yes,
expert
I
people,
did.
and it was like
I
it
did.
was almost like a part-time job. Like I think is what it
It
required. And I
was.
remember you were so excited about it, but also kind of like not really sure, like, if I have time for that. So thankfully, the universe threw you a bone with that because I don't know where you would have
Yeah.
squeezed it in.
Yeah. I mean, and I like went through the application process and made it like fairly far, and then it was like I was talking to my best friend Sarah, who's a psychologist in Virginia one day, and she's like, "So tell me again, how many hours does this require?" And I was like, "Oh, I don't know, like 15, 20." And she was like, "Okay, now tell me all of the other things that you do." And I'm like, "Okay, shut up. Shut up." And sometimes like if I overschedule myself, like Sarah is a good touchstone, and my younger sister Hillary is a really good touchstone for me too. Like I'll say like, "Okay, yeah, I'm seeing clients today. I start at 8, I don't end till 7. I don't even know if I have a lunch in there, and my sister will just text back, 'Why do you hate yourself?' And I'm like, I know. I know."
Wow,
So
that's
She's
fire.
she's direct.
so she's direct with me, not with other people. I'm usually like the more direct one, but you guys know y'all are siblings, so
sisters do
you've
that.
got that kind of like where you can just really like
Yeah.
lay it out there. And so
But
yeah,
it's
she'll
great to
say
have
things
those
both.
friends that
Yeah.
will
Yeah.
ground you and say, "Hey, what the heck are you
Yeah,
doing?"
absolutely. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah, Sarah is very direct. My friend in Virginia, and my sister is very direct. And then, Lucy and Avery also too are like are very direct as well. In a very kind and loving way.
Okay, because you brought it, I have to know, what is your favorite Disney film?
Oh,
Oh,
good question.
Ooh.
girl.
Like, I have to
You
know
want
now.
Disney, or do you want like Pixar? Do you want
Disney.
classic? Do
Star
you want
Wars.
Star Wars? That's Marvel.
I know, but Disney
That's
has
Star
it
Wars and
now.
Marvel, and that's like that's not
Yeah.
the original. But
Are
I do
you
love Star Wars. I do love Marvel. I'm a big fan of Pixar films. I mean, as a psychologist, I love Inside Out,
okay?
and
Hmm.
Inside Out 2. And I have those plushy figurines all over my office. I have all of them. They're all in my office. I think I'm probably I don't know, maybe the only one in our office. I have toys. I have like Disney inspired toys and things in my
That's
office.
cool.
Even though I see people 16 and up. I don't see little kids. But,
We all need them.
Adult toys.
Yeah.
yes,
Uh-huh.
yeah. Well, not those, Lucy.
Yeah.
Oh, God. Then you just took a totally different turn. Yeah,
Well,
totally different turn. Uh-huh.
different kind of adult toys.
That's great. That's great.
But I do. I love Inside Out and Inside Out too. Like I sometimes I'm like, God, I wish I could have been a collaborator
Yeah.
on those films, because I think they just do such a great job of personifying emotions and how they work. And sometimes I assign them as homework to clients that have never seen them or are having difficulty with like trying to identify emotions. And so sometimes that can be like really, really helpful for folks to look at it in a different way.
That's
Mhm.
Oh,
awesome.
that's so
Yeah.
fascinating. I usually assign Sleeping Beauty and Beauty and the Beast.
Mm.
Oh.
Mhm.
Um,
Why
for
those two?
yeah, for the journey the masculine takes to kind of integrate their feminine,
Uh-huh.
and the journey the feminine takes to integrate their masculine, and
Mhm.
especially Beauty and the Beast is an interesting plot point with she goes out in search of her father, and the idea of her having an internal masculine is repulsive, right? And there's this big, massive, shadowy beast figure that she can either run away from or kind of go towards, and then awaken her internal masculine. And then those are usually the only ones that Monsters Inc. too, and the parallel with anxiety, with that experience of like the
Mhm.
monster versus just being afraid of something that you
Mhm.
don't really know, and what's waiting behind the door. Those are, I think those are the
Those are
only
great.
ones that, yeah.
Wow. Who knew?
or I use them as metaphors, right? And
Sure.
you don't actually have to see the film, or there's an idea of a film as like an archetypal thing because it's been around society for so long. I'm not going to skip over Lucy because Lucy has not answered the question.
I was just about to say.
Permission slips. Yeah. So probably the biggest one I think I've played with more recently is the permission to rest. So I think there's been like a fundamental, really big shift somehow in the past few years from like doing to just being, and allowing like a lot of spaciousness around getting out of that like hustle and grind mentality and just like allowing myself to do far less. And I think I need, for whatever reason, I'm just in a phase right now where I need a lot more rest than maybe I would want. But that I just am like leaning into it and trying to trust. And it's interesting that's like with, being in midlife and a lot of this messaging around, midlife and menopause, and that you should like be strong and eat all your protein and lift so much. And I work with eating disorders in my private practice. So I think all of that bothers me a little bit from like the eating disorder kind of diety culture message that it feels like gets tied into that. But as I've really been thinking about, I think the other thing is like, are we ever allowed to just rest? Like, why approaching age 50 do I need to be like the fittest and the strongest I've ever been? Like, am I ever allowed to have like a gradual like decline? Like, could that be okay? Or does it always have to be like endlessly better and better? And I think I just feel like exhausted by all of that. So
you are allowed to rest for sure.
Yeah.
And to listen to your body. That's awesome. Tere is all about the CrossFit.
You mentioned working out, strength training, protein. Yeah, check. Bro kibble. Yeah, check.
Bro kibble.
Okay, so I feel like the concept of self-care has been changing.
Real quick before we go on, do y'all have permission slips that you do? Just out of curiosity.
Yes.
Every day. Tere.
Which ones?
My biggest one is when I don't work out. Like when I give myself permission to not work out. And that includes my light jogging that I've introduced to my routine. And part of that is because I sit, I mean, obviously I sit for work a lot. And all of the activities that I do outside of work as well. I'm sitting right now doing this. I sit to write. I do quite a bit of writing on my own as well. And so I find that a lot of the things that I do are very sedentary. And at the same time, I try to get anywhere from 6 to 10 hours of working out a week. And so when I take that rest day or 2 a week, I'm trying to embrace how good it is for my body, because I'm also seeing the gains in my weightlifting and all of the other things as well. So that's one big permission when I stop to do things and just be.
My turn. So the biggest permission I've given myself this year has been permission to be sexy, permission to be body happy. All my life I looked at pictures of myself and been like, oh, in high school I was so thin. I never felt thin. I never felt, you know what I mean? Like beautiful in that way. Like I always wanted more. I always was looking for I need to look fitter. I need to be skinnier. I need to be this because this is what the magazine is showing me. But now I'm like, I'm loving my body. Like I do hot yoga every day. And for Mother's Day last year, it was the first time I gave myself permission to just wear a sports bra. And so what if a little roll sticks out? Like I gave myself permission to do that for my 50th birthday. I gave myself permission to wear red. I have never worn a red dress because it was sex. It was sexy. It was too much. It was too provocative, and I always felt uncomfortable with that color. And now I'm like, I look fabulous in red. And so I've given myself those permissions to enjoy every single curve of my body. Even when I smile, the wrinkles around the eyes, you're smiling. So what if you have wrinkles around your eyes? So I'm giving myself that love and happiness. We have a cousin that's body happy, and every time I seen her post and everything, it's just like, oh my God, I need to learn from you.
Yeah.
Like she just welcomes every curve of her body. And
I don't
I
think
love
I've ever
that.
heard that phrase "body happy," but I love that.
Yeah.
Um,
Love that too.
She is.
And so I'm getting there. I'm not there like my cousin. I'm like taking steps to free myself from all of this. You have to cover your legs. You have, like I went to school, you can show this, all of these things. And so I've always been like, oh, I need to cover up, I'm showing too much. And now I'm like, just enjoy your body, enjoy your life, be free in that way as well.
It doesn't
Amazing.
help that we're Catholic.
Well, that too.
That whole like guilt, shame thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the whole guilt on like showing, if people look at you, it's your fault. You're wearing sexy clothes. If you get assaulted, it's your fault. What were you wearing? You shouldn't be wearing that. So all of these things, growing up with all of that, was like, okay, I don't need to make myself visible. Like I need to cover up. And now I'm like, just enjoy your body, every inch of it.
Stop tempting men.
Right.
You heard that? Have you?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's gold.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so self-care has been something that I feel like has been transforming, right? Because I feel like at some point it was, taking baths or going to the spa. And I feel like there's a much more grounded version of it where it's taking care of yourself, of like, okay, I'm going to tidy my home so that I can have a clear mind, or I'm going to take care of myself through cooking, right? And doing things for the self that are nurturing in a much deeper way. And there's this sense of like self-care as a temporary escapism of like, okay, well, I'm going to take care of myself by taking this vacation versus being able to prioritize the self in a sort of permanent lifestyle sort of way. And the distinction of that it's a stark contrast. Is there a way to kind of speak to that difference and how you would go about doing the permanent lifestyle version of it?
I think in this, I think one thing we talked about together and in the book too is that I think one issue that I have or we have with self care right now is that sometimes it gets very commercialized, and that self care can be oftentimes we talk about like it doesn't need to be another item on your to do list. Like I think that especially overscheduled, like hustle culture, over busy women especially kind of like have okay, and I've also got to do self care, and I think somehow self care has kind of gotten a bit, like I said, commercialized. So a lot of times you need products or to pay like to spend money in some way on a self care product or item. I think sometimes self care can kind of get like woven into like something to do with your appearance as well. Like self care is a face mask or it's a facial. I mean, that can kind of get woven into these things that are very external, right? And I think that the way that the how of self-care may change day to day. But to your point, I think the permanent part is that that it's coming from you and not coming from outside. So like I'm the only one that knows that if my self-care today is to be very active and clean up and do all of these different errands, or if my self-care today would be to rest. I'm the only one that knows that. And if I'm getting like 10, self-care hacks from like some Instagram post, that could not be more external, right? And so I think the way to make it more authentic and more um, fitting is for it to come from inside. And so, I mean, self care may look like going to get a facial. That may absolutely, that I'm not judging that, but it certainly is not going to come from you scrolling or Googling, what do I need to do just to care for myself, and then finding it there. It needs to come from us. Right. And what's going on with like
Yeah.
your own intuition, your own gut feeling, your own wisdom of, oh, this is what we need right now.
And I
Teresa
think
is allergic to scrolling. That's why I laughed.
Yeah, I can't do it.
That's great.
And I think, like, to piggyback on what Avery is saying, I think the three of us have, I think, a practice that we do for self-care is asking ourselves, what do I want? What do I need? Um, l- you know, day to day, throughout the day. Encourage our clients to do that because, again, like what Avery was saying, I mean, it has to come from inside because it may look very different from day to day, right? Like, I may not feel like working out for an hour today, like what I usually do. It may be like what's going to feel good for me actually is to go and just do a little stroll around the neighborhood or sit outside, or something that's going to be calming and peaceful. I mean, we talk about numbing in the book, and I think sometimes like that is a real sort of insidious thing that happens to everybody where it may feel like kind of like self-care, like we're doing something, but you rarely feel better after the fact. Like if I'm really intentional about watching a K-drama that I'm totally into, and I know that the episode comes out on Friday, and I'm going to like intentionally sort of carve out time for that because I know that's for me and I want to do it. Perfect Crown, Disney Plus, take a peek. It's really good. The last two episodes drop tomorrow. So that's for me versus, how when you lay there and you're on Netflix and you're just looking at preview, but you're not really into it. It's just you feel kind of dead and you don't really feel very good afterwards. So I think like the intentionality around it is really important. But starting with those, like, what do I want? What do I need? Are good prompts to help folks clue in.
That's awesome. I've done what you said, the whole preview,
do
and I
that all
spent
the
30
time.
minutes looking at previews, and at the end, I don't watch anything because I'm like, I'm tired.
That's right.
I'm
Yeah.
exhausted.
I'm exhausted.
This sucks. Turn the TV off. I don't have a TV anymore.
I'm like connected to something that I know one of the prompts, even thinking about this podcast today, was like, is there like a non-negotiable way you prioritize yourself each day? And I think for years I might have had like, oh, I move my body pretty much every day, or whatever it may be. But I think as I've gone over time, like I actually don't have the only thing that's non-negotiable is like being able to tune in to like see what I need to do, right? Because if I have this script of like things I need to check off or I need to follow, like that became very disconnected and more like going through the motions, and didn't really tell me much about like where I am in this one particular moment and what it is I need.
I love the flexibility around that. That's amazing. Yeah. And sometimes it's that flexibility that allows us to explore new areas of who we are, but also what we need in the present moment. That's
And it goes
amazing.
back to trust in your intuition, because your body's speaking to you, is telling you what you need. Like, no,
Yes.
stay in bed, woman.
Totally. Totally.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
absolutely.
Okay, so it was interesting when I reviewed kind of your website. it mentioned how you guys were friends for over a decade. And I'm wondering, like, just kind of what is the glue? Was it almost like the three of you were attracted to each other based on like a common ideology, or was it just going through potentially the grind of school? I don't know if you guys went to school together, or there whatever sustained that relationship, because it's beautiful to have a friendship that lasts for so long.
Or motherhood, right? Because all of you
Yeah.
have teen kids and you have, I don't know, maybe you met at school at some point, because I have friends that you meet that way, you know?
Oh, and I think it was none of us went to school together, right? And so I think actually where we all ended up like first being together was in like a weekly consultation group, right? So when you come into private practice, right, it's kind of lonely, it's isolating. And so being new in practice, we started this consultation group. And I think Avery and I started at first with someone else. And then a few years later, maybe Jamie joined as well, right? And so we've had this like kind of rhythm where we kind of got to know each other. And I think there was just a lot in common, right? So once again, all psychologists, all in the same field. We have kids around the same age. Avery and I, for a while, had kids at the same school. And we would laugh a little bit that this is like the super target of friendships, right? So someone who understands like what it's like to be in these different environments and have the same sort of career. And so I think there was just a lot of overlap, and we were all very aligned in kind of how we were thinking about things, the way we approach things. And so then we went from like the consultation group that kind of had fizzled out maybe like around the pandemic. And then we kind of started the podcast, which was a great way to kind of like, all right, how do we work together? Like we know we are friends and we have a lot in common and we think similarly, but what about this like piece about how we, because you can be friends with people but not want to work with them, right? That's like a different sort of thing we're tapping into as well. And so I think that enabled us to kind of play around with that piece and see that there was a lot of alignment and similarities there.
You
I don't
can
know what else y'all
also
would add
you can
in.
also have sisters. Doesn't mean you want to work with them.
100%. 100%.
What are you trying to say? Just tell me. Just you can just go out and say we're all like psychologists here.
I'm saying that I wouldn't do a podcast with my other sister.
Oh, good thing she doesn't listen. Whoever she is. We have two sisters, by the way.
Yeah.
Whoever she is.
I was thinking Mari.
Why would you say that? You had an easy out. I was giving you an easy out.
Well, she doesn't listen to the podcast. You're right.
She doesn't. I don't think Paola does either.
Also, Marisa wouldn't do a podcast with me either. So it's
no,
it's
she
probably
won't. She
mutual.
would most definitely not do a podcast with you.
Yeah. It made me cry. I cry when I laugh.
Okay, so any difficulties or challenges with boundaries? I mean, placing boundaries. When you say no to something, you're saying yes to something. When you say yes to something, you say no to something. And if we're looking at the self as the priority, so being able to have a full cup and give from a full cup, that means saying no a bunch, right? And then being very, very strategic and thoughtful about saying yes. Any kind of I guess guilt or anything like that with establishing boundaries, maintaining boundaries, especially if we're talking from the theme of prioritizing the self.
So yes, it'd be the short answer is guilt is going to be there. And we talk about boundaries. We've talked about that with several different groups, and we come up with this kind of like picture kind of metaphor that when we say yes to something, we think that we're avoiding guilt, right? So we're kind of like weighing like, if we say yes, then we get to avoid guilt is kind of what a lot of times we say yes when we mean no. We'll say yes because we're trying to avoid guilt, right? And what I think it's easy to forget in that moment is that when you say yes, you may avoid guilt. You may, like if Lucy asked me to do something and I say yes, I may not feel guilty because for saying no. But if depending on the ask, if Lucy's ask is really big and I really don't have time for it and really should have said no, I am going to still feel some negative feelings. I might feel resentful. I might feel stressed and frantic. I might feel tired. I might feel angry. Like there's a lot of other negative feelings that can come from saying yes. And so I think that we often think another way that we kind of described it is like that sometimes yes is like a credit card. Like it feels so good to say yes. It feels so good to like get those shoes and take them home. But when the credit card bill comes or when the like having to act on that yes comes, having to write that article that you said that you would write or having to go teach that class that you said you would teach, sometimes that can feel like, oh, like frustrating and difficult. And so this idea of like really thinking, almost like thinking through the yes of like, okay, it's going to feel good to say yes, but how's it going to feel to like deliver on this? And being able to kind of think about those feelings that it's not purely, and this kind of goes back to the people pleasing thing, it's not our one singular priority to make everyone happy. One, that's impossible. And two, that keeps our focus outside, right? But to be able to say, like, yeah, there are going to be negative feelings either way, or could be, right? There could be negative feelings for saying yes. There could be no negative feelings by, that accompany saying no. And that kind of idea of like tolerating that, acknowledging that that's coming, the guilt or the resentment or whatever might be coming, and this idea of our like own ability to tolerate that discomfort um, has been really, I think, powerful for us as we're trying to set our own boundaries and for other people um, as we're kind of coaching them to do the same.
As you were talking, I was thinking, also, you buy the shoes, then you put them on, and they're so freaking tight. You can't dance in them, right? And so saying yes because something looks pretty or something looks, oh my God, this is a great idea. I'm going to look fabulous in this. And then wearing it and walking with it, it's a different story.
Correct.
So saying yes also has to come with like, okay, is it really also a yes for me?
That's
Is
right.
it going to be comfortable when I dance salsa? Is it going to be comfortable when I walk? Or,
Right.
and if
Love
it's
that.
just for looks, then that's a no.
That's
Right.
not workable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I love that kind of like extending that metaphor because it really is like trying it
Yeah.
on, and all of that takes time. And I think a lot of people get into the habit of like, you asked me to do something, yes,
Yeah.
and not even giving themselves a second to say, wait a minute, kind of like Jamie, like we were talking about earlier with the Disney opportunity of like, wait a minute, like this sounds amazing, and I'm already stretched so thin with my time. Like even an amazing, awesome opportunity may just not. I may be a no for that right now.
Yeah.
But all of that requires time. A lot of times it requires like quiet and tuning in. But that requires us not to get into that, like to try to break up almost with that automatic, somebody's asking me something, I say yes. And I
And,
think a lot of people kind of get into that habit
yeah.
and
And
kind of trying to
also,
give themselves some space.
what
Yeah.
you guys mentioned, giving yourself permission to change your mind.
Mhm.
Return the shoes.
Yeah, that's right.
They're
That's
not
right.
comfortable.
That's so funny. Literally, my niece just got new running shoes and they're too small. And she has to return them. So this scenario is like so real in my life
Yeah.
right
Yeah.
now.
Love it.
It's great. And it probably matches amazing with her outfits. Right? Like those shoes look perfect with my
Yeah.
dress.
Yeah, that's right.
They're not
That's right.
comfortable.
That's right.
No, they're too small. What's funny is like while you were bringing up those topics, what I've been kind of coming across for myself is my most important commodity right now is time,
Mhm.
and I'm really mindful of how I spend my time, and I'm protective of my time, and I have to be a little bit more flexible with it because sometimes I go into calculations because I'm weighing all of these different projects that I'm working on, the private practice and this and that and this other thing. And part of the things that go into, okay, how many things am I doing and do I have time for this? A lot of it is bids for connection, right? So my father, who's 85,
5.
my father, who's 85, has been over time just telling me that he would like to see more of me. And it's great. It's a great thing to have. And also that he's actually vocalizing a a desire, and he's making a bid for connection, which is also new. I feel like this is new, that he's kind of consistently been telling me the same thing. So I'm factoring in, okay, the calculation of, is once a month enough? And trying to make things in my mind work of time allocation, leaving the city because he actually lives in Connecticut, the neighboring state, and driving time and okay, if I drive there, how can I spend, and maybe it's just not that difficult. And maybe it's just I just go visit him more often versus doing all of this math. Yeah.
Well, I do think sometimes that one of the things we talked about with boundaries, it sometimes can be helpful to like make the decision really intentionally, like once, so that you don't have to constantly make that decision, almost like making like a policy or like a rule, like whether it's around like visitation or anything else of like, hey, like I think sometimes it's more helpful to say like, I would rather not be leaving town, more than once a month or more than once, whatever, like the kind of like really tuning in and getting clear so you don't have to make that decision every single time. But also having that flexibility that like if something comes up, you're not going to hold yourself to it like either way. But I do think that idea of really seeing what works for you and being able to kind of like go with that versus constantly questioning. Because I think sometimes with all of that math, it's like you're trying to give yourself permission to make the decision one way or the other when you could probably just like decide this is what's going to work for me and give yourself permission for that to be what you do, and then flexibility to change that if it stops working for one reason or the other,
Yeah,
And even the
absolutely.
part of us that wants to like fix it and figure it out way in advance, like I do that a lot, like trying to figure out the next like 5 years, right? Where it's like, okay, maybe we just like I plan the next time I'm going to visit him, and I can go like on a case by case basis rather than having to do so much at once.
Yeah,
I love that.
absolutely. And making the decision beforehand is
Mhm.
is something that will help me just not think about it so hard.
Right.
Like
Right.
Kind
the
of like
cost of
like that one
overthinking.
time they say, "Should we just wear a black T-shirt when we do the podcast?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not. I'm wearing colors." She's like, just so she didn't have to think about it.
I do have a therapy uniform, and it's this. I was supposed to see. Anyway, this is the therapy uniform: a button up and a blazer, and I just take the next button up and pick a blazer, and that's I don't have to think about it.
And she's wearing shorts. No, I'm kidding.
No, I'm
She's
wearing
like,
jeans.
actually, yes, I am.
No. Okay. Any other thoughts on boundaries or no's and yeses?
I think sometimes it's good to kind of do inventory on what you say yes to regularly to see if it really is kind of truly a yes. I know for me, um, what happens is maybe some of the stuff that I've said yes to, uh, we can't avoid like monotony and routine things in life. We have the have tos that we have to do, but sometimes what happens is I'll say yes because I'm seeking out something and I don't know quite what it is. Like maybe it's me trying to deal with boredom, and so I'll say yes to this, or this. When really, if I would have just taken some time to look at, to kind of like go back to the shoe credit card metaphor, if I've gone in my closet and I see what I have, and like, do I like this anymore? Like, do I need to throw it out and maybe replace it with something else that is now a better fit, or something that I would just enjoy, a lot more, that that would be great to kind of do some inventory around that. Um, like I think like uh, our hobbies and fun things that people a lot of times unfortunately look at as like the optional things in life. Um, I'll do inventory on those. Like, I like to bake and cook, but over the past few years, I've really gotten into gardening, and what sort of like lights me up even more. And so, if something is kind of not lighting me up in the same way rather than adding on to the stuff that I'm already doing. Like it's better for me to stop, take a look at it, see if I want to let it go, and then if I need to add in something else, then say yes to the new thing rather than just continuing to add on.
A question as mothers, because we have teens and they have, activities and whatnot. And when it comes to prioritizing yourself and not feeling guilty about it, right? Like, or your kids would be very good at also making you feel like that guilt trip, right? Or not feeling selfish about, no, right now I need to just go. And then I thought about it yesterday as I was thinking about also mental health and women that are just giving birth and they're having babies and they're not caring for their hormones are going bananas. The kid is crying and crying. And I remember an episode of my son just crying and crying and crying. And I'm like, if I stay with you right now, I'm going to hurt you because I don't know what else to do. I don't know how to make you stop crying. And so what I did is I put him down. He was like, "Wah." I put him down and I walked outside for 5 minutes to the front porch. And I just like breathe. It's not you. Breathe, right? So giving myself, even though it was 5 minutes, I prioritize my my mental health, my like otherwise I'm gonna be a monster to you. Right? I'm gonna turn into this. And so giving now that they're older, obviously, there's still needs and there's still time. And at times you still have to say no. Right now, I need 20 minutes to look at my whatever show you're watching or whatever thing calms you down or makes you zen or breathing or ground outside or hug a tree because that's what I do. And so just doing that without feeling like you're not putting your kids first, which I mean, at least as my culture, Latinos are like, your kids come first, you sacrifice for them, you do everything for them, you come later. And you sacrifice for your husband, for everybody. Moms eat last. You know what I mean? And it's just being able to prioritize you without feeling, as a mother, without feeling like, guilt or shame or any of that. How do you guys deal with this
I think
teens?
I think the first thing is to kind of acknowledge that you may feel guilty, and that may be okay, right? That there's sometimes I think Jamie and Lucy both mentioned this therapist that we had kind of worked with in different capacities named Taylor. And she talks about that guilt. I love this analogy she uses. She says guilt is kind of like a neighbor like knocking at the door. And if the neighbor knocking at the door says, "Hey, your dog got out of your fence. You need to go repair your fence." The guilt is a service. It's serving you, right? It's helping you to go repair the fence. But if it comes knocking and it accuses you of something that you didn't do, of like, oh my gosh, whatever, the dog came out, blah blah blah, but in a way that you're like, yeah, actually, there's nothing I need to feel guilty about. There's nothing I need to do here. that you can kind of let it go. It's not serving you. And so I think sometimes guilt can be helpful. Sometimes it can say, like, hey, Avery, you're not spending enough time doing X, Y, or Z, or you're not focused on this thing. Like, I mean, if I was really going to let myself feel guilty about being late today, I could really get trapped in it. But I could also say, like, hey, maybe I could have tested out my equipment a couple hours ago, made sure it wasn't going to be, such a sound problem. But I think that there's sometimes you can learn from it and say, okay, like that's helpful to know. But then you've got to leave it and say, but if I was continuing like right now to apologize and go on and on and on about my sound issue, that would ruin this whole experience that we're having together. And so I think sometimes it's helpful to kind of acknowledge the guilt and say, like, hey, are you trying to tell me something? Is there something I can learn from or glean from this feeling? And sometimes it's yes. But sometimes it's just there making you feel bad. And I think as a parent, when like you did, that's a beautiful example of you knew I have to take a break. I am not being my best self. I'm not even being myself. I must take a break. And my goodness, that happens with infants and it sure happens with teenagers. That you're like, I know I'm not being who I want to be in this interaction. And so I must take a break. I have to take a break. I mean, ideally, we can have some space to take care of ourselves before it gets to that point. But absolutely, there are times that it's like that you may feel guilty, but also like this was the right choice. And only you kind of know what that is. Um, but yeah, that's what I would say.
And I think along those lines, I think, especially looking back when my kids were infants, right? I think I would only allow myself a break. Like the threshold was so, I guess, high, like only when it got
Mm,
really bad. Or I could only if I was working, like doing like it wasn't okay for me to like get help so I could go and like read a book or like get my nails done. Like it had to be something really, really important. Or you had to be at the breaking point and risk of like injuring my kid. And then it's okay to take a break. So I think like definitely we do want to prioritize ourselves in those moments. But I think sometimes that gets us caught in the guilt that it has to be really bad for us to like put ourselves first and
mhm,
almost like how do we move that back. And I think for a lot of women maybe that space before then is like the harder space. Like I don't have to, like I'm not going to fall apart if I don't, but gosh, it would be really nice. And like am I allowed to do it there? Right? And
mhm,
so that permission for getting support, putting yourself first, I think can be really helpful. I think the other thing with teenagers too, I think this concept of like seasons of life, does that make sense? So like there are times that my husband and I are like, okay, we should probably like it'd probably be good to like plan a date night and have that. But we kind of like make the choice right now to like hang out at home more on the weekends simply because like we have these kids. I'm really aware right now of the time in terms of like they're leaving home. Like I've got one who's gonna be senior, one who's got just a few years left. And like I think right now our priority is to like how do we soak up every minute, like being available and around for them, like knowing that there's this season coming really quickly when like actually I won't really have to prioritize them or that won't be an option even if I
mhm,
really wanted to. So that's kind of a helpful mindset too. And I don't think we're doing it from a place of like, oh, we really wish we were doing something else and we feel like resentful around it. So that's good to like tap into,
mhm,
but kind of keeping that in mind.
mhm.
I love that. It's like a temperature check.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I agree. And I also think too, like, uh, I want to model for my kids how important it is to really pay attention to what you're wanting and needing. And, realistically, like, I can't be available to them 24/7. Like, that's just not the case. And I don't want to consistently put my needs last. I don't want to teach my children like that that's what they're entitled to, that they should expect that from other individuals, like that I come first all the time. And that my kids don't, they don't think that. And they see like the benefits of doing things for yourself, like prioritizing. So, like every year, I go to Disney with my sister, like in February, and they know like that's the week that is for me and for my sister to bond, to get away, to like fill our cup with something that we love. And I, I know that when I come back, that I can be even more engaged and in tune with what's going on with them. And I, encourage them to kind of like do the same thing. Like they don't, I love being around them, but I know that like right now, their time with friends is like really extremely, important. And I want them
Yeah.
to have that as well. And so, I think just modeling for them, like, um, uh, not spreading myself so thin and putting everybody else first. It's not a service to me. It's not a service to anybody else. And I want them to see that.
Mhm.
So, as we're wrapping up the episode, and sometimes where people are hearing this for maybe the first time, some people are hearing this as a reminder. Oh, right, I have to remind myself to fill my cup first. Um, Regardless of what stage the listener is at, I feel like a takeaway of like a baby step, right? Like a small, manageable thing that anyone can do right now would be a nice takeaway, especially for this episode in particular. Uh, any kind of actionable first step to take. Okay, if I start today, and if I haven't, and if I've been last on my to-do list, uh, what would be a good starting point?
I think often it's even like just becoming aware of like what would I even want? Right. So for those of us who are really oriented towards prioritizing everyone else, sometimes in that process we abandon ourselves and become disconnected from ourselves. And we have shoved down our own wants and needs for so long that before we even take a step or take action, we have to like start by tuning in and being like, oh, like if I were to prioritize myself or take care of myself, like what would that look like? Like, what do I want? What do I need? Like, what am I missing? What would bring me joy? And we have to like start with that curiosity of like tuning inward to even start to to know like what direction to move. That would be my suggestion.
I love that. Be
That was
curious.
awesome. Yeah.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Any
I
other
think
starting points?
I think one would be to give yourself space, kind of to do what Lucy said, but like especially when you're asked, put on the spot, like, will you do this? To give yourself, and we even offer like some space saving like phrases of let me check my calendar and get back to you. Let me think on that and get back to you. Just to not, to try to like break that pattern of like someone asks, yes, to just give yourself a second, ideally to tune in, take a breath and really see how, if it feels right for you. But even just to look at your calendar and see like, okay, what is this going to require of me? Am I a yes or am I a no? And really giving yourself that space to make that decision more intentionally versus just like automatically.
I like
One
that.
of our permission slips that we talk about is permission to hit the easy button. And so I think like that can be really helpful, like especially just everybody's so busy these days. Like what is something that you don't have to think about necessarily, like how can I make this as easy as possible? So like you were saying, you have your uniform for work, right? That means like you take the blazer and you take the shirt out and that's what you do and that's the easy option, for you. Or for us it may be like tonight, okay, we're going to have breakfast food because that's what we have in the fridge. And I don't have all day to like fix dinner. And we may be even eating it on paper plates, So it's again, like, what's the easiest thing that we can do? How can we make it easy?
Simplify.
Okay.
Permission to simplify.
Literally, I'm jealous. I want breakfast food for dinner. I love it. It's my favorite. And paper plates is like, okay, let's make it even easier, right?
Yes. Yes.
Amazing. So where can people get in touch with you? What would be the best way?
You can contact us through our website, which is badassrebellion.com. And it's just like it sounds like BADASS rebellion.com. And there's, you can sign up for different like permission slips there, et cetera. But you can also get our email through that and contact us through that.
Perfect.
Perfect.
We did not plan that. Amazing. Okay. Thank you so much for sitting with us, for chatting with us. I'm really glad we were able to have this conversation, and hopefully it's a first.
Do you feel badass today? I feel badass.
Yeah, I
right
feel
now.
like a badass. Come on.
Great.
And we'll be back next week.
With your permission.
And that is all we have for you this week.
Make sure you follow Permission the Podcast.
And we'll be back next week with your permission.